He told her, "You're not my family." 2 years later, he saw the child with his eyes. His office was the kind of place where emotions were out of place, where everything was made of glass, steel, and quiet power. Floor-to-ceiling windows held the city below like something small and manageable, a world that could be shaped with a few decisions and a pen stroke. Adam stood with his back to her, his suit cut sharp against his broad shoulders, dark hair neat, posture straight. He always held himself as if afraid to bend, as if any softness might crack him open. Malin stood near the door, hands clasped together to keep them from shaking, though she told herself she was calm. She had walked here believing that honesty mattered, that the truth could be shared and held between two people. She thought she knew him. She thought that somewhere under the ambition and control, there was a man who could care. She had rehearsed the words on the way. She imagined he might be silent at first, shocked, maybe even frightened, but she imagined a conversation. Something real. Something human. She imagined him stepping closer, asking when she found out, asking what she felt, asking what this meant for them both. She imagined him being someone who loved her enough to try. But when he finally turned to face her, his blue eyes were like winter, clear, still, and absolute. He did not look surprised. He did not look wounded. He simply looked annoyed, as if something had been interrupted that he did not want to pause. He crossed the room toward her, not quickly but with the measured pace of someone who believes the world will wait for him. He stopped a few feet away, close enough for her to see the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, the tension in his shoulders, the faint crease between his brows. "Malin," he said, and even her name sounded like an inconvenience in his mouth. Before she could speak, before she could gather the courage to tell him about the small life growing inside her, he continued, "This is not a conversation we need to have." She blinked, thrown off balance. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice quiet. Not fragile, just careful, like stepping on thin ice. His gaze did not soften. It sharpened. "I can see where this is going," he said, and she realized he thought he already knew everything. "But I'm not interested in emotional attachments. I've worked too hard to get here. I don't have time for relationships that complicate things." Complicate. The word settled inside her like a stone. She searched his face for something, regret, hesitation, anything, but there was nothing. Just efficiency. Business. Strategy. Her hand moved unconsciously toward her stomach, fingers pressing lightly, not to reveal but to reassure herself she wasn't imagining what lived there. "I'm not trying to complicate your life," she whispered. "I thought you deserved to know." He exhaled slowly, as if her presence itself was a pressure he didn't want to feel. "You're not my family, Malin." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The sentence cut cleanly because of how effortlessly it left his mouth. No struggle. No conflict. Just certainty. "You're not part of my future." She felt something in her chest shift, not break, not yet, but move in a way that warned of breaking. The room felt too large and too empty at the same time. She looked at him, not the businessman, not the powerful figure the world admired, but the man who once kissed her slowly in the dim light of her small apartment, the man who once said her laugh made him feel like the world was something warm. But that man was gone. Or maybe he had never existed. "I see," she said. The words were steady, though her pulse thundered. She wanted to ask him when he stopped caring, but she realized asking would give him power over the truth of what she felt. So instead, she lifted her chin just enough to hold what was left of her pride. He didn't ask her to stay. He didn't ask if she was hurt. He didn't ask anything at all. Malin turned and walked toward the door. She reached for the handle with fingers that were cold, though she didn't remember feeling cold before. She did not look back, not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't afford to. The second she stepped into the hallway, the city noise rushed toward her, loud and indifferent, and she realized she was breathing too fast. She pressed her hand to her stomach, this time fully, clearly, protectively. "You are mine," she whispered, and the words steadied her. She walked out of the building and into a life she had not planned, but she walked forward. Not because it was easy, but because she had to. Because the child inside her deserved more than the coldness she had just left behind. She did not know what the future would look like. She only knew it would not be built on someone else's definition of worth. She stepped into the sunlight, the city wind catching her hair, and even though her heart ached, she kept walking. Because sometimes strength is not loud or proud. Sometimes strength is simply choosing to leave. The months that followed blurred into one another, but not in the soft, dreamy way people romanticize pregnancy. It was a period shaped by exhaustion, quiet panic, and a kind of courage that didn't feel like bravery at the time. It felt like survival. Malin rented a small studio apartment above a flower shop on a street where the city noise softened into something livable. The room was narrow, the walls thin, and the windows drafty in the early mornings, but it was hers. And it was safe. She furnished it slowly, a bed, a small table that doubled as her workspace, a second-hand crib she found at a community center, carefully cleaned and assembled piece by piece. Every object had meaning because every object was chosen with care, not ease. Working became harder the further her pregnancy progressed. She took freelance design and illustration jobs, drawing late into the night, sitting cross-legged at the small table with her laptop and sketchpad. The glow of the screen often made her eyes ache, but she pushed through because there was no one else to carry the weight. Sometimes her body trembled from fatigue, sometimes nausea forced her to stop, but she always returned to the table. She was building a life one line, one brushstroke, one invoice at a time. When loneliness crept in, she placed her hand over her stomach and simply breathed, letting the tiny flutter beneath her palm remind her she was not alone, not really. Birth came earlier than expected. A rainy night in late spring, when thunder rolled low like a warning drum. She had no one to call, no one to drive her, so she packed a small bag herself while her hands shook and took a cab to the hospital. The ride felt endless and too fast at the same time. Her breathing was shallow, but her mind was sharp in a way that only fear can create. She would not fail this child. The labor was long. Longer than anyone prepared her for. She gripped the sides of the bed, teeth clenched, tears streaming silently down her face, not from pain alone, but from the weight of everything that had brought her here. The nurses spoke softly, their hands sure, their instructions gentle. And then, finally, the crying began. Jason entered the world with a powerful scream, as if announcing himself with all the insistence of someone who had always intended to be heard. When they placed him on her chest, his skin was warm, his heartbeat tiny but strong. His eyes opened slowly, heavy with newborn haze, and when they focused just enough to meet hers, the breath left her body. His eyes were unmistakably blue. A piercing, clear, luminous blue that did not belong to her. For one suspended moment, the image of Adam standing in his office, untouched, unmoved, flashed through her mind. But then Jason let out a small, soft sound, a whimper, and she felt her heart shift toward him so completely that there was no room left for regret. She whispered his name, Jason, feeling the weight and grace of it fill the room. She held him as though he were both fragile and unbreakable, as though he was the beginning of something she was only just learning how to understand. She cried then, but the tears were not sharp or bitter. They were soft, warm, quiet. Tears of release. Tears of arrival. Life with a newborn did not allow space for mourning. It demanded presence, attention, and a kind of love that grows not from idealized joy, but from closeness. Nights were long and fractured, shaped by feedings and the small sounds that only mothers learn how to interpret. Jason slept curled against her, his breath warm on her skin, his fingers small and searching. The world reduced itself to the rhythm of his needs and her responses, a dance built on instinct rather than instruction. When morning came, sunlight filtered through the curtains, illuminating the room in a soft gold that made everything seem gentler. She watched Jason sleep, his tiny hand resting near his face, his chest rising and falling with steady softness. And in those quiet hours before the day fully began, Malin allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Yes, the world outside continued without her. Yes, Adam's life climbed higher, faster, louder. Yes, he had chosen ambition over connection. But here, in this small room above the flower shop, love was growing. Real love. The kind that stays. The kind that holds instead of lets go. She didn't know what the future would look like. She didn't know how she would manage all of it. But she looked at Jason's sleeping face and understood something deeply, quietly, irrevocably. She didn't need certainty to move forward. She only needed him. And he was here. The next 2 years unfolded slowly, like pages turning in a book she was both living and writing. Jason grew with the kind of intensity only children possess, exploring the world as if each object, each texture, each sound was something miraculous. Malin learned every version of his cry, the hungry one, the frustrated one, the "I just want to be held" one. She learned the rhythm of motherhood by instinct, not by guidance. There were no grandparents visiting with warm casseroles, no laughing friends offering to babysit, no father dropping in with eager arms. It was just her and Jason. And somehow, that was enough. The studio above the flower shop became a home made of small, meaningful routines. Every morning, the scent of fresh-cut stems and wet leaves drifted upward through the floorboards, mixing with the faint sweetness of baby lotion and laundry soap. When Jason learned to crawl, he dragged small toys across the room like treasures. When he learned to walk, he wobbled like a tiny sailor learning balance for the first time, his arms outstretched and proud. And when he learned to talk, his voice filled the space with laughter that made the old windows feel less lonely. Work was still the hardest part. Malin worked late, long after Jason fell asleep, designing covers for self-published authors and illustrations for blogs. The pay was inconsistent and modest, but she took every job that came her way. Some nights, she would pause mid-stroke, her hands stiff and her eyes burning from fatigue. But then Jason would shift in his sleep, or sigh, or murmur a dream sound, and that small, instinctive reminder would give her strength to continue. Money was never abundant, but she learned how to stretch it like thread, thin but unbroken. She shopped at thrift stores for clothes and bought vegetables at the end of market days when the prices dropped. She became good at saying, "We have enough," even when she wanted more. Not material more. Just breathing room more. But she did not complain. She did not view her life as tragedy. It was simply what it was, full of difficulty, yes, but also full of meaning. Jason's personality bloomed early. He was curious, bold, and quick to smile, with a habit of staring deeply into faces, as if trying to understand the thoughts behind them. His blue eyes attracted attention everywhere they went. Strangers often commented on how striking they were. Malin always thanked them politely, but inside a quiet ache twisted. Not because she regretted Jason or wished him different, never. But because his eyes were a reminder. A memory she had chosen not to revisit. She did not speak of Adam. She did not say his name. She did not follow the news, though it was impossible not to see him sometimes, his face on a billboard, his company mentioned in a headline, his name spoken by strangers at coffee shops. He grew more successful with every passing month. His presence in the world expanded while hers remained small and contained. And yet, when she watched Jason run across the room laughing, when she felt his hand wrap around her finger, she realized something quietly profound. Small did not mean lesser. quiet did not mean weak. Her life was not broken. It was simply different. Still, there were moments when loneliness pressed at her. On rainy evenings when the street outside blurred behind wet glass, or on holidays when the world seemed full of gatherings she was not part of. She sometimes imagined what it would have been like if Adam had chosen differently, if he had said, "Stay," or even just, "Tell me." But those thoughts were like touching a bruise, painful and useless. She had no room in her heart for longing backward. Instead, she learned to find joy in the ordinary. In the warmth of Jason's small hand in hers as they walked to the park. In the way he collapsed into her arms when he was tired. In the soft weight of him sleeping against her chest. In the days when laughter came so easily it surprised her. She found strength in the simple act of continuing. Every sunrise was a choice she made again. By the time Jason turned 2, he had a favorite blanket, a favorite song about stars, and a habit of running straight into her arms as if the world began and ended there. Malin realized that love had reshaped her life into something she could never have imagined, and something she would never trade. She did not know that everything was about to change. She did not know she was about to see the man who had once turned his back on her. She did not know that the life she had built so carefully was about to tremble, not because it was weak, but because something long buried was about to surface. And the world she thought was closed would open again, slowly, painfully, undeniably. It happened on a day that began with ordinary simplicity, sunlight on the window glass, Jason laughing at pigeons, the smell of warm bread from the bakery on the corner. Malin had not planned anything special. She just needed to get out of the apartment for a few hours, to let Jason run and feel fresh air. They ended up at a restaurant with an outdoor terrace, one she liked because it had soft music and a view of the river. She sat with Jason in a high chair beside her, feeding him pieces of fruit while he babbled in half-formed words, pointing at boats and strangers and the wide, moving summer sky. It was a peaceful moment, the kind that felt gentle enough to breathe in fully. She did not see him at first. There was no cinematic shift in the lighting, no sudden hush in the air. Just the soft hum of conversation, the silver glint of forks, and Jason tapping the table rhythmically with his palms. Then Jason stopped. It happened so quietly that Malin didn't notice right away. His hands stilled. His wide blue eyes fixed on something behind her, unblinking. His tiny lips parted, not in surprise or fear, but in pure recognition that made no logical sense. Only then did Malin turn. Adam stood a few tables away, just stepping out of the doorway. He was dressed in a dark suit, elegant, fitted, unmistakably expensive, but something about him was different from the man she remembered. His posture was the same, still straight, still composed, but his expression was not sealed in ice. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd been outside in the wind, and his eyes searched the terrace slowly, almost cautiously, as though he was looking for something he didn't expect to find. And then his gaze fell on her. For a heartbeat, the world sharpened around the edges. He froze, not dramatically, not with shock that demanded attention, but with the quiet, stunned stillness of someone whose reality has just shifted without warning. His gaze moved to Jason. Malin watched recognition spread through him like a slow, powerful current. It began in his eyes, widening them just barely, then tightened his jaw as if something inside him slammed into place. Jason's blue eyes met Adam's blue eyes, identical, impossibly so. And even though Jason had never seen this man, he reached his small hands forward as if drawn by gravity. Adam crossed the space between them almost without meaning to, his steps silent, his breath uneven. He stopped at their table, standing close enough that Malin could feel the warmth of his presence, smell the faint trace of his cologne, something clean and cool like rain on glass. She did not speak. She did not move. She simply looked at him. Adam's eyes flicked to her face, searching for anger, or accusation, or explanation, something to anchor himself. But she did not give him anything. Her expression was calm, steady, quiet. Not forgiving. Not hostile. Just present. As if she had been expecting this moment, even though she hadn't. His voice, when it came, was low and rough. "Malin." She nodded once in acknowledgement. He looked back at Jason, who was now leaning toward him with open curiosity. Adam's hand trembled slightly as he reached out, not to touch, but to steady himself on the back of the chair. The tremor was small, but Malin saw it. The man who once dismissed her with practiced calm was now struggling to breathe. His voice broke slightly as he asked, "Is he?" She didn't need him to finish the sentence. She didn't need him to explain what he already knew. "Yes," she said, her voice soft but firm. "He is your son." The truth landed like a stone thrown into deep water, silent at first, then rippling outward in waves that would touch everything. Adam exhaled, but the breath sounded like something unraveling. Not regret, not rage, something more raw, more human. A crack in the armor he had built around his life. He sank slowly into the chair across from them, as if his body could no longer hold itself upright. His eyes never left Jason's face. He looked at the child the way a man looks at a door he had once closed and suddenly realizes it led home. Jason reached out once more, and this time Adam gently extended his hand toward him. Tiny fingers curled around his own. Jason smiled, a bright, effortless, open smile. Adam's expression broke. Not shattered. Broke open. And in that moment, Malin understood something she had never prepared for. He had not been ready then. And she had not needed him. But now, whether she wanted it or not, the story was no longer just hers. The past had returned, not to claim her, but to reckon with what it left behind. And the world she had built so carefully began to shift. Quietly. Indelibly. He came back the next day. Not with flowers or apologies or anything dramatic, but with the uncertain, careful steps of a man approaching something he was afraid to break simply by touching it. Malin had expected him to disappear again, swallowed by the world he lived in, the world of deals, conferences, and headlines. But instead, he showed up outside the small building where she lived, standing near the flower shop entrance with his hands in his pockets, as if grounding himself in the scent of fresh lilies and damp stems. He looked out of place there, too polished, too expensive, too controlled, but also strangely human. She spotted him from the window upstairs. And she didn't rush. She finished fastening Jason's shoes, smoothing his curls with gentle fingers. Only then did she carry him down. When she stepped outside, Adam's eyes moved immediately to Jason. There was no hesitation, no confusion, just a quiet, aching awareness. Jason babbled something cheerful, pointing to a row of yellow tulips as if announcing a discovery. Adam smiled, small but real. It startled her. She had forgotten he used to smile like that, without calculation. The awkwardness between them was not sharp, it was soft, heavy, filled with things unsaid. They walked to the park together, not because they planned to, but because Jason tugged Malin's hand in that direction and Adam simply followed. The three of them sitting on a park bench would have looked ordinary to any stranger passing by. A family enjoying a morning. A father watching his son climb and fall and climb again. But for Malin, there was nothing ordinary about it. She sat beside him while Jason stacked small stones with fierce concentration. The silence between her and Adam was thick but not empty. She could feel him gathering words the way one gathers courage. Finally, he spoke. "I didn't know how to feel when I saw him yesterday," he said quietly. "I thought I would feel shock, or anger, or something, defensive. But I didn't. His voice faltered, and he exhaled slowly. I just felt like everything I've done, every choice I made, led me to miss him. She didn't respond. Not because she wanted him to suffer. But because she needed to hear the truth, not the polished version, not the business-like dismissal of emotion. The real truth. Adam looked down at his hands. They were steady now. Back then, I was afraid. Afraid of being tied to someone. Afraid of losing control of my life. My father. He stopped, jaw tightening. He treated family like a burden. Like something that takes from you until there's nothing left. I didn't want to repeat his life. So I cut everything out that felt like attachment. Malin absorbed his words carefully. They did not excuse him. But they explained him. She spoke quietly, without accusation. You didn't give me the chance to tell you. You decided for both of us. He nodded. I know. And I was wrong. I was blind. He looked at Jason again, and Malin saw something falter inside him. Something long held. I thought control kept me safe. But all it did was leave me alone. Jason, unaware of the weight around him, climbed onto Adam's knee and settled there as if it were the most natural place in the world. Adam went still. His hands hovered, unsure, before he finally placed one gently on Jason's back. The movement was slow, reverent, as though he feared the child might vanish if he blinked too hard. Malin watched the scene with a tightness in her chest she could not name. Pain, yes. But also something dangerously close to warmth. She had never wanted Jason to grow up fatherless. She had simply chosen not to drag him into something cold. Adam swallowed hard. I can't ask you to forgive me, he said, his voice rough. I can't ask you to trust me. I don't deserve either. But I want to know him. I want to be here. Whatever that means. However long it takes. His words did not rush. They did not plead. They simply existed. Honest. Unpolished. Malin felt something shift, not a door opening, not a wound closing, but a breath releasing after being held too long. She looked at him steadily. Jason deserves to know who you are. Not the version the world sees. The real one. If you can give him that, we'll see what comes next. Adam nodded, and for the first time she saw his composure crack, not from pride, but from quiet relief. The moment was not a reconciliation. Not forgiveness. Not love reclaiming its place. It was a beginning. A fragile, uncertain, necessary beginning. And beginnings are powerful things, even when they tremble. The weeks that followed unfolded slowly, like someone turning the pages of a book with deliberate care. Adam did not try to take up space all at once. He didn't show up bearing grand gifts or promises meant to erase what had been done. Instead, he arrived in small ways, quiet ways, the kinds of gestures that cannot be faked because they require presence rather than performance. He came by in the early afternoons when Malin worked, offering to take Jason to the park or for a walk by the river. He sat on the floor beside him, building wooden towers and letting Jason knock them down again and again. He was clumsy at first, unsure of how to hold a toddler's attention, how to soothe frustration, how to balance authority with gentleness. But Jason didn't seem to care. Children don't need perfection. They need presence. And Adam was learning how to stay. Sometimes Malin would watch them from the doorway. Adam would be focused so intently on Jason that he didn't notice her standing there. His expression was different now, open in a way she had never seen before. The sharpness that once defined him had softened around the edges. There was vulnerability there, real vulnerability, not the polished version people use when they want sympathy. It was the vulnerability of someone who understands he has something to lose now. They began to find a rhythm. Not a family rhythm, not yet, but the beginnings of one. Jason would run to show Adam his drawings, messy scribbles of blue and green that made sense only through the brightness of his excitement. Adam would kneel, listening as though Jason's indistinct words held entire worlds inside them. There was something almost reverent in the way he listened. As if he were learning a language he had never known existed. But healing is not soft and steady. It is uneven, unpredictable, shaped by old scars and sudden memory. One evening, Malin was cleaning up toys while Jason slept on the couch, his small body sprawled across a blanket. Adam was helping, placing blocks into a basket with slow, thoughtful movements. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of a streetlight outside. It should have been a peaceful moment. But the past does not always come with warning. Adam reached for a small stuffed bear and paused. His hand tightened around it, just slightly. And then he spoke. "My father was like a storm," he said, his voice low. He did not look at her. He came into a room like he was already disappointed in everyone who lived there. "My mother spent her life trying to make him less angry. I spent my childhood trying not to become him, but I did anyway. I thought shutting everyone out made me strong. I thought distance meant control." Malin stood still, a toy in her hands, the weight of his words settling between them. "When you told me about the baby that day, I didn't believe family could be anything but a trap. Something that takes from you until there's nothing left," he continued. "So I thought pushing you away was the only way to protect myself. I didn't consider what I was destroying. I just saw something closing in on me, and I ran." He finally looked at her then. His eyes were not cold. They were drowning. "I see him now, and I don't understand how I ever thought being without him was safer. I don't understand who I was then." Malin's breath caught, not because she forgave him, but because for the first time, he had told her the truth of himself, not the polished explanation crafted to sound reasonable. The truth was raw. Imperfect. Human. She set the toy aside and leaned against the table, not looking away from him. "Knowing why doesn't erase what happened," she said quietly. "But it makes this easier to breathe." He nodded as if her words were something he needed to hold on to. There were still nights when the past pressed too closely. Nights when the memory of being left tightened around Malin's ribs. Nights when Adam lay awake in his apartment, listening to the silence and realizing how loud loneliness could be. But they did not turn away from the difficulty. They did not run. They showed up. One small moment at a time. There was a morning when Jason fell in the park and scraped his knee. His face crumpled, tears streaming in quick, panicked sobs. Malin reached for him, instinctively, ready to soothe him. But Jason reached for Adam instead. His small hands clung to Adam's shirt, his face buried in the hollow of his shoulder. And Adam held him, not awkwardly, not hesitantly, but with steady hands and a soft voice murmuring reassurance. Malin watched them, her heart tightening and loosening all at once. This was what she had done alone for so long. And now she didn't have to. The realization did not feel like surrender. It felt like relief. And slowly, carefully, almost unintentionally, trust began to return. There was a point in late autumn when the season seemed to echo the changes happening inside their lives. The leaves outside the flower shop turned deep amber and faded gold, drifting down to the sidewalks in slow spirals. The air grew cool enough that Jason needed a small knitted hat that kept slipping over his eyes. He would push it up with clumsy fingers, laughing every time it fell again. Every day felt quieter, softer, but not empty. Their world was shifting in a way that was almost too gradual to notice unless you looked closely. Adam no longer felt like a visitor. Not because he was always present, but because he understood the space he was entering. He never acted as if he had earned a place simply by wanting one. He helped with groceries. He carried bags up the stairs. He learned that dinner in a small kitchen meant moving with gentle awareness instead of taking up space. He listened, truly listened, when Malin spoke. And he laughed sometimes, a low, warm sound she had almost forgotten existed. But healing is never just forward motion. It has places where the air bends, where the past surfaces unexpectedly. One afternoon, they were in the park. Jason was chasing a flock of pigeons with determined focus, his small boots kicking up leaves. Malin and Adam sat on the worn wooden bench nearby. The sky was an overcast gray, heavy with the possibility of rain, the kind of sky that makes the world feel quieter. A mother walked by with her husband and 2 children. Their laughter was bright, unburdened, the kind that fills a space without hesitation. Malin's gaze lingered, just a second too long. Adam noticed. He always noticed now. "You're thinking something," he said gently. She did not deny it. "Sometimes I wonder what we would have looked like if things had been different," she said. Not bitter. Not wistful. Just honest. Adam's hands were clasped loosely between his knees. He looked at the leaves on the ground before looking at her. "I wonder that too," he admitted. "More often than I'd like to admit. But we can't rebuild from a past that didn't happen. We can only build from now. If you want to." Her chest tightened. Not painfully, just full. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she watched Jason, who had now abandoned the pigeons and was gathering the prettiest leaves he could find, holding them up to the sky as if the sun might change their colors. She remembered the hospital room. The loneliness. The silence. The weight of carrying their child alone. Those memories didn't disappear simply because he was here now. They lived in her muscle memory, in the shape of her spine, in the way she guarded her heart. But she also remembered his trembling hands when he held Jason the first time. She remembered the way his voice broke when he said he had missed everything. She remembered the way he listened at night when the past felt too close to her skin. He had changed, not for her, but because life finally demanded he look at himself. And she had changed too, not harder, not colder, but stronger. Jason ran back to them, leaves overflowing from his hands, and spilled them into her lap with triumphant pride. She gathered him into her arms, his laughter pressing warm into her neck. Adam brushed a leaf from Jason's hair with slow, careful fingers. Malin looked at Adam, and there was no fear in her eyes this time. Only clarity. "I don't know how to start again," she said. "Not the way we once were. That's gone. But I think we might be able to start something new. Something different. Something honest." Adam's breath left him like something released. His voice was quiet when he spoke. "I don't want what we had before. I want this. You. Jason. Exactly as we are now. Changing, learning. No illusions. No distance." The wind moved through the trees overhead, scattering a wave of golden leaves around them. Jason clapped, delighted by the sudden burst of color, and the moment felt strangely sacred. This wasn't a declaration of love the way stories usually frame it. It wasn't a dramatic vow or grand emotional speech. It was something much harder. It was permission. Permission to try. Permission to rebuild. Permission to stay. That evening, back in the apartment, Jason fell asleep curled between them on the couch after insisting on "one more story" 3 times. The lamp cast a warm halo over the room, softening every sharp edge. The world outside was quiet, muted by early nightfall. Adam didn't move away. Neither did Malin. They sat shoulder to shoulder, and the silence between them felt real, alive, full of shared breath and unspoken understanding. Malin rested her head lightly against his shoulder. This time, he didn't freeze. He didn't tense. He simply let himself lean back into her. Not as someone taking, but as someone finally learning how to belong. It was not a promise. It was not an ending. It was a beginning that felt steady and real. And beginnings, when they come this softly, tend to last. Winter arrived quietly, without the dramatic storms of the past or the biting winds that once made the city feel sharp. Instead, the first snow came as a fine, gentle dusting, coating rooftops and sidewalks in a pale shimmer. The world outside seemed softer, as if wrapped in cotton. Inside the apartment, warmth gathered in small ways, Jason's laughter echoing against the walls, the kettle whistling on the stove, the steady presence of Adam and Malin moving around each other with a familiarity that felt both new and inevitable. It had been months since the day at the cafe. Months of cautious closeness, of slow healing, of learning each other without pretending the past did not exist. They hadn't declared anything official, hadn't labeled what they were becoming. They didn't need to. It was visible in the way their lives had begun to overlap naturally. The toothbrush Adam kept beside hers. The small drawer of Jason's clothes in his apartment for the nights the boy fell asleep in his arms. The quiet mornings at the kitchen table where they drank coffee while Jason drew in a notebook. The pauses between their words that no longer held distance, only thoughtfulness. One day, near the end of winter, Malin received an eviction notice. The building was being sold to new developers, the flower shop downstairs would close, the tenants had 60 days to leave. The news settled over her like cold water. This room had been so much more than a home. It had been the place she rebuilt herself, piece by piece, night by night. The thought of leaving it cut deep. She told Adam that evening. She expected concern, sympathy, maybe a practical suggestion. She did not expect what he said. "I've been looking for a house," he said, not rushed, not dramatic. "A real one. Not for me. For us. Somewhere with space for Jason to run. Somewhere you won't have to carry everything alone. I didn't say anything before because I didn't want to push you. But now, it feels like the right time to tell you." Malin didn't answer at first. She stared at him, searching for any trace of assumptions, of entitlement, of the old sharpness. But his expression was open. Not expectant. Not triumphant. Simply patient. "So you're not asking me to move into your world," she said quietly. "No," he replied. "I'm asking to build a new one with you." There was a long silence, but it wasn't heavy. It was the kind of silence that holds breath and possibility. They spent several weekends visiting the house together. It stood near the edge of a quiet neighborhood where children rode bicycles on sidewalks and old trees arched their branches like protectors. The house wasn't grand or showy, it sat steady and warm under a sloping roof, its porch wide enough for sitting in the evenings. The living room had tall windows that caught the light in a way that made everything look gentler. The kitchen was small but open. And at the back, a yard stretched out under the sky, with room enough for gardens, laughter, and growing feet. Jason ran across the grass the first time they visited, stumbling and laughing, his breath forming little clouds in the cold air. He lifted a stick like a sword, announced the yard was a castle place, and Malin felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but with fullness. When they signed the lease, it was not with ceremony. No speeches. No promises carved into poetry. Just the simple act of choosing the same future, in the same moment, together. The move was messy. Boxes everywhere. Jason putting toys inside kitchen drawers for reasons only toddlers understand. Snow tracked in on boots. Laughter louder than frustration. Not perfect. Real. On the first night in the house, they didn't have furniture set up yet. They sat on the living room floor, eating takeout from paper containers. Jason fell asleep with his head on Adam's thigh, his small hand wrapped around a corner of his blanket. The room was dim except for the warm glow from a single floor lamp. Outside, snow continued to fall in a slow, quiet hush. Malin leaned against Adam, her shoulder resting against his. She didn't think. She didn't plan. She simply let herself rest. He rested his cheek lightly against her hair. No tension. No expectation. Just presence. Do you ever wonder, Adam said softly, if things happened exactly the way they needed to, even the painful parts, to bring us here? Malin closed her eyes. Maybe, she whispered. Maybe we had to break once to learn how to hold each other without fear. He breathed out, not a sigh, more like a release. They didn't need to say I love you. Not yet. Not because the words weren't true, but because the truth was already living in the room with them, in the warmth of shared silence, in the ease of leaning, in the sleeping child who connected them more deeply than any sentence could. Outside, snow settled softly against the windows. Inside, they were finally home. Not because the past was gone, but because the future had arrived, quiet, steady, and theirs.